Greetings again. This is Athena Jezik, and today I want to work on a shoulder that has been injured and it's going up the neck a little bit. You're familiar with this person. This is Diana, and she kind of racks herself up when she's training, and so we're trying to figure out exactly what she's doing to get the posture and the muscles and everything working correctly. But she did have a little bit of a mishap, and there's some pulling and tugging. She did go and have a chiropractic appointment. Yeah, so she's been aligned with the major bones, and all that's good. So we're going to get into the soft tissue and see what's going on, and see if we can start to reorganize those tissues so she can get back to normal, whatever that is. So with that, I will say, here we go. The problem is with her right shoulder, and how does it run? It runs up the back into the neck. Is it right in here?
I mean, the injury was like a strainess of lifting overhead.
Okay.
So it's kind of all across here.
Okay. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm checking the level of the shoulders by just placing my hands on the shoulder itself. And I'm checking to see the alignment and what I'm feeling right from here, because there's a crookedness. It looks like the vector is broken about right in the rib cage area. It's right around the low part of the sternum, the xiphoid process. It feels like that's where there's a little bit of a broken vector, which is just the line of alignment, because her shoulders should be a little more like this. And so when I'm moving them, it goes back that way, but it kind of wants to spring back. Very subtly, very, very subtly, so it's not something that you can usually see until your eyes are trained to see things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by doing a diaphragm release in the thoracic outlet area, which is the sternum, the clavicular joints, and the clavicle, and the upper few ribs there. And this is on the bones, so this one hand goes underneath between the shoulder blades. The other hand is going to be stretched out on top, like so. Right underneath the clavicles, their clavicles are right along this part of the finger, and then the rest is underneath. The thumb just kind of hangs out. Doesn't know what to do, it just kind of hangs there. I like to keep my thumbs off of people. I try to just make contact with where the problem is and not have a lot of other energy running into the area. So I am accessing now the muscles, and they are beginning to make some undulating type of move, especially in the back and in the rhomboid area, which is between the shoulder blades. And as she relaxes deeper, the tissues are pulling me a little bit deeper in, and they're beginning to slide around this platysma area, a little bit of the pec, like a sheathing fascial stuff. It feels very much like the fascia is moving around and ironing itself out in the way that it does. And so all I'm doing is following what I'm feeling the movement for. The touch is very light. And I'm also doing a little bit of energy work where I am intentionally pushing energy between the palms of my hands, even though they're not lined up. I'm pushing that energy in through her at kind of an angle so that I can feel the energy from my top hand into the bottom hand. And that's another whole part of this work. Once you get used to what you're feeling in the soft tissue and the subtle anatomy, then you can begin to work with the energy part of it. And it's the energy where you're touching, not energy off the body. There's different ways of working that energy. And it seems that if people don't have a touch for the lighter work, it's harder to pick up the energy. It's harder to pick the energy up when it's off the body. There was some movement going on here at the sternum. Okay, so that tended to release, and the next one I want to do is at her neck. So this one, these are the typical diaphragm releases from cranial work. So you can begin to see how I combine opening the body up. Okay, now when I put my hands back here, I can tell that there's a lot of tension in this side of the neck. Is that where you're feeling it, right around here?
Mm-hmm.
So that is a big area that would cause some discomfort. So I'm going to take this hand and I'm going to pull that up under on the base of the skull. And I'm going to use just one of my fingers, whichever one happens to land there, and put the finger along the edge of the base of the skull. It's right where the bone meets the tissue, so you have to get way up there, in there. And then this other hand, I'll come from this direction, is going to go on the hyoid bone, which is a floating bone. And we're going to check the position of that, because sometimes that will be out. That bone is there to protect some of the structures for swallowing and breathing. It's a floating bone, so it's held there with muscles. So you can see how if something is out of alignment with a muscle, it would pull that hyoid bone a little bit out. And the connection that is felt is between the two fingers on the hyoid bone and the hand that's at the occipital base. And there is quite a bit of dancing around going on with that. Now, this sort of work is very relaxing on the person on the table if they're going to allow it to be so. It's a practice just to let go and allow the work to work, let the body do what it needs to do, and trust the body to get into the alignment it needs. And always remember that function will follow structure. So the better the structure is, the better the function is. And there we go with that. That was a nice unwinding. I have a towel under here, but I am going to move the towel. And the first thing I'm going to do is this hand is going to go with these two fingers are going to catch on either side of the vertebrae at the atlas, between the atlas and the occiput. So that's where that's going to go. It's not pushing in there, it's just resting there. And the reason I use those two fingers is because the head will rest better in the palm of the hand when you're in a better alignment as a therapist. When the vertebrae is between these two fingers, because then their head can rest nicely in the palm of the hand. Whereas if you're using these two fingers, you have your hand bent a little bit. And not that that's so bad, but it's just that after a while, that is a little bit of out of alignment position for the therapist. And you need to take care of yourself doing this work, because it's it does tax the joints. The head is heavy, the sacrum is heavy, so, you have to build that up. So I've got my fingers placed there, and now what I'm doing is I'm letting the fingers just sink in between the atlas and the occiput, and as it sinks in there, my fingers are curling a little bit more into the direction of the eyes, so you have a little curving happening into the direction of the eyes, so the hand is going kind of like that. That's very exaggerated. And once you feel like you're in there as far as it'll go, and it's not pulling you in anymore, then we'll do a vault hold where we're on the top of the head as well. And so here we're going to just get a feeling for what's happening globally with the bones of the head and see what happens there. And what's happening, what's feeling under my hands is that there is some movement in the bones. Very, very slight, but they are moving into a little bit different position. And as we wait for that to happen, there was a little bit of a jump on the frontal bone. Okay. Now this hand is going to go underneath the neck, and I'm going to traction the neck just slightly. So if the fingers on my left hand are still in position, and what's going to happen is they're up there into the tissue at the occiput, the base of the occiput. So as that happens and they're pointing towards the eyes, there's going to be a little bit of a stretch, like a little pull in that direction, just a very slight one, because I'm actually accessing the dural tube, and we're going to stretch down and see if there's any catching going down the tube. And so I'm going to just begin to do that, and I can have this other hand wherever I want it, but I'm going to make a little bit of stretch. Now I'm going to put it on the neck and see where that goes, but paying more attention to the fingers that are at the base of the skull. And as I feel the stretching of the tube, there is a restriction right about where we felt it at first, where the vector line was. So somehow the dynamics seem to be that she has twisted somewhere down, even down into the rib cage a little bit. But we'll see how that goes. I can't really say how the injury happened because I don't know. All I have to go on is how it feels with the stress lines and the restrictions. Now what's happening now, there's a nice stretch happening in the neck. It's a very slight pull, and you're actually stretching more of the fascia than you are the skin. So with this, I'm going to put this back underneath her head. The reason for this pat under the head is to keep the chin long and level with the parallel. You don't want the head to be rocking backward or forward. You want to have this long stretch in the back of the neck. That's very, very important when you're working on people. Now, this still feels very tight through here. Yeah, it feels like it's a good thing she had a chiropractic adjustment before, because this thing was probably really... Does that hurt?
It doesn't hurt to the touch, but it's definitely in the area where there's stuff is going on.
Okay. Okay, so...
And it refers right down into this joint here.
Okay. Well, that referral is probably the... partly the trapezius, but it's hard to know because there's a lot of muscles. Neck and shoulder area has a lot of muscles because there's so much range of motion with them. So they move in little ways. Okay, now my fingers are along the spine. Where her spine is, the fingers are right along the spine. So the fingertips are like between, like, let's see, what is that? C2, 3, 4, and 5. And I'm just allowing that to rest in, and as she relaxes more, my fingers are being pulled in more. This has got to be done very, very lightly because there's a mechanism taking place here where the brain is defending this area so it won't get injured anymore, and it has to come into a trust pattern in order to start to release. And when it does, the brain is picking up that it's safe to let go, and then it can begin to put a new pattern for a new muscle memory pattern in there. And that will only happen when it's allowed to be done slowly. If there's a lot of force behind that, it may feel good for a while, but it's not going to actually change the pattern of what's going on. So here we have it. Now this other thumb is just going in the areas where she says it's referring, and I'm just finding the places where the muscles and the fascia feels a little bumpy. Right here, it just, on my thumb, it just pulled me in a little bit deeper. And that sensation softened something in the neck. So there's something happening there. It's the bone. Find the little joint area. It's right in here. And I'm going to just hold that and see if that joint needs to shift itself around. Is your arm falling asleep?
No, it's just weird. It feels like there's it's definitely something going on in it. Shoulder socket.
Did that bring a sensation down the arm?
It's like right in here. It feels something.
Okay.
I don't know how to describe it.
Did that happen?
It's like a pulling and a pressure at the same time. It's
right there.
It's uncomfortable, but not like pain, like an injury. It's just
okay. So I'm going to be moving my hand to the joint area, the big joint, and holding this acromioclavicular joint area, and see if there's any alignment pattern that has to happen in that area. You know, you guys can look at an anatomy book and get an idea. It's not really that important that you remember the names of everything, but it is important that you get an image of what you're feeling and what's happening and how it's connected. So you can just look at a lot of pictures. Dr. Upledger told me that his most important thing was wanting to get it in our hands, and then he said the language and the muscle names and all that can come later, because he didn't think that was the important thing about doing this kind of therapy. He felt it was more important to get it in your hands and then do the book work. And this is feeling pretty good. Are you feeling any rumbling going on?
Definitely some shifting.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to check the sternoclavicular joint. Which is the joint where the clavicle and the sternum come together. And again, like I've mentioned before, this is the only place that the shoulder girdle is attached to the skeleton. So it's important to check that joint to make sure that it's balanced. I've kind of discovered that myself, working on various shoulders. But I've never been in any sort of a class that they pay any attention at all to this particular joint. So I'm hoping that maybe this can start to be paid attention to, because this alignment is important to the rest of the shoulder girdle, and probably has something affecting the rib cage as well, in that it's related to the sternum. Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to go to the shoulder. The palm of the hand is going to fit into there, so it's very much attached in, and we're going to See, and I've still got my hand up there at the neck. And what I'm feeling at the neck is where that kind of knot or that bubble feeling was alongside the spine. It feels like that is flattening out, kind of like deflating, like a balloon deflating. So I'm hoping that that is making a new pattern. And all of that, you know, now she's got, there was just a big engagement with the shoulder socket. The muscles engaged in a very interesting way. There's a little, that was a little flutter that just happened, but the shoulder overall is rotating.
That was.
What was, is that just a release? Did that happen down in the chest?
It was my whole body just
Oh.
kind of jumped.
I don't know if you picked that up on camera or not, or saw that jump, but that was a jump. That was something that she did, and what that signifies is it was more than likely a release, something coming from that little bubble that I felt, that little shift that I felt at the same time in the shoulder. You always get validation when you're doing this work. And the other secret to doing this work is just getting your head out of the way. Let your heart lead you. Let your higher self guide your way. That's a communication that's important to develop. The mind usually just tricks us. Okay, now what's happening is there's an unwinding feeling that's happening in the shoulders, and it's also relating up into the neck. So as the shoulder wants to rotate more, I guess it'd be laterally, the muscles along the cervical vertebrae are also in concert with them, and they are also moving in their own direction, suggesting that there's some avenue of twisting or turning in along that line. And we can try to figure it out if we want to, but it's really not that important to figure what is going on. We just need to know that something is, and we want it to change to correction. And correction is always the way that the body wants to go. And now what's funny is it feels like it's pulling my hand over the shoulder down in a little more into the deltoid. It's pulling medially, and it's pulling really hard. It's really it's needing to go that direction to unlock something. All right, it just went to the end of it, and now it's turning itself around. And there was a very unusual vibration up at the place that was most traumatized, I guess you could say, in the neck. A very unusual kind of a frequency that I picked up that I don't feel very often. It's a very high vibration. It's very quick. And now the shoulder is moving back in the direction. And the neck is starting to push my fingers out. But the shoulder is really feeling like it's opening. You know, if you start to explore the subtle anatomy and some of these techniques that are real subtle, you'll be surprised of the world that you find inside of there. Our bodies are incredibly remarkable. The healing process of the body, if it has what it needs, is outrageous. Our immunity is so strong. And that's what I hope people get back to. A little more understanding of the subtle world. Okay, that's feeling like there's some relationship going between the two. I know it probably doesn't look like much, but the world inside is way different than what it looks like visibly. Okay. Is that tender still?
Yeah.
Okay. How does that feel? Cracking. Okay, this is probably the next thing that needs attention. Yeah. Sometimes you can check with the other side to see. Now what it feels here is like there's a real strain on the muscle. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to go into the muscle a different way. I don't really have it in my head how I'm going to do it, but the body is showing me. This is where the intuitive part of you, it's very important to connect to that if you're working on this kind of thing. Because intuitively you'll be shown. And you will question yourself when you're first learning this, because the brain will get in the way and confuse you, think that you're not doing it. But just trust that intuitive part and develop that. Changing? Is it changing at all?
Mm-hmm.
Now it feels like the shoulder is wanting to roll more forward, and I'm going to see if I can hold it and guide it to be a little bit flatter. I'll probably need to go to the scapula. Another thing this work will do for any of you who are interested in taking this on is you'll definitely learn what it's like to have a lot of patience. Okay, there's a pulsing going on my bottom hand, which signifies it's a therapeutic pulse, and it means that the tissues are getting ready to move. Sorry, I didn't mean to bump you in the nose. Okay, there's a lot of rumbling in the back hand, in my bottom fingers. That's taking a lot of change. Does that feel different?
Yeah, it feels like my humerus maybe is not
Yeah, I'm
seated where it's supposed to be.
That's quite possible. This has been making that kind of a shift.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's been done so far is we've gotten deep inside where the joint is to get the more subtle anatomy to be softened so that it's where the movement is initiated is down deep. And now Diana has said it feels like her humerus isn't quite lined up with the socket. And so I'm going to see where I can go with that. So I'm going to just put my hand underneath, along the edge of my fingers are on the edge of the scapula. And I'm not really on the scapula other than the edge of it and the very top part of it. The rest of the hand is where the humerus bone is and the socket. It's kind of in that area. And then I'm going to hold this on top and see if we can... The direction that I'm doing, there's a slight traction that I'm doing as well. Very, very small. But I'm pulling in. By pulling, I don't mean pulling. Just urging, edging this in a lateral direction, and feeling a little bit of stretch that's happening, and I can feel a lot of rumbling going underneath there. So let me know if you feel some of that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, there's a lot of little corrections happening in here. Okay, I'm just checking a little deeper through here. Oftentimes when there's something going on in the shoulders, the elbow will be a little bit out of position. So I'm going to just check that. I've shown you in other videos how to position your hands, but basically your fingers, you have the elbow, the big muscle elbow joint is between the two fingers, and then you just let it rest there and just feel if there's any movement, because sometimes the bone will move a little bit between the radius and ulnar, and that can be a little bit out and throw the shoulder out just a little. And there's a little traction. There was a little jump on this part of the arm. You want to be careful with this that you don't push hard into that funny bone, because there's a nerve running there. That would be very uncomfortable. And there's a lot of activity actually in the elbow. So I'm going to traction the hinge joint down and also rotate that ulnar open and see where it wants to go from there. As you know, the injury was lifting something, so the arm and the hand and the whole bit is involved. Okay, that looks good. I'm just going to check the wrist. So we'll just do a little pull here. And your hand is okay, right? That didn't take anything. Okay. Is that comfortable to be down, or do you? It's okay? Okay. When there's an injury, you always want to ask if they're comfortable. Sometimes it's hard to get their arm straight, so you want to lay it across their body. And then checking the bicep to see if there's any. And this goes up underneath the arm quite a bit. So here I'm into the armpit. I'm going to move this out just a little bit. Yeah, let's do that, yeah. To get up to the head of the, up into the bicep area and also into the joint from coming in through the armpit. And this you want to drive up very slowly, and if they're ticklish, you got to go really, really slow. You can override the ticklishness, but you have to come into it very slow or your people will just fly all over the table. And here I'm just being pulled in from the bottom side, the armpit side, and we're just watching. I'm just feeling the shoulder also making some slight moves as these connections of the muscle are working themselves around. The other thing you want to be careful for under the armpit is there's a lot of nerves and veins and different things going on. So you don't want to use a lot of heavy pressure and disturb some of those other subtle structures. Okay, so that's... Okay, leave your arm kind of loose, so don't help me. I just want you to tell me when it's uncomfortable. So here I'm just going to take it straight up, and then I'm going to rotate the shoulder a little bit at a low angle and out. Ooh, was that okay? It was kind of a jump. Now I'm going to take the arm a little bit higher, and what I'm going to watch for is what happens to the shoulder. So as I lift it, what the tendency is usually the shoulder wants to go up with the lift, but I'm going to be pulling it down, tractioning it down. When I say pull, it's not really like a pull, it's more like a really small traction, because I want to make sure that this is going to come up in the position it should be raising up. And you will tell me if it's uncomfortable. So the shoulder is still, there's definitely some catches going on in these positional parts. Okay, I'm going to bring it back up. Okay, that's good. And now I'm going to you always want to hold them really well when you're moving body parts and keep the positioning. So I'm keeping that shoulder drawn down. Let go. There you go. You'll always find that they want to help. Okay, so we're going to bring that back down and just have her relax. Let your arm heavy into my hand. There you go. Now don't let the muscles engage. Let me know if there's a sore spot.
It's a little pull, but not really.
Pull inside in here. Okay. So because she had a little pull there, I'm going to just hold that, because that was the point of discomfort. And let that arm come down carefully up to that pulled area. Now here's where a little bit of muscle work is going to be a little beneficial for this. Although it does feel to me like there's an injury here. It has some fluid in it. It feels like a muscle's been like strained, which is kind of an over pull. It's not as bad as a sprain, but it's uncomfortable. Now to hold that open. The next thing I'm going to do is go underneath to her scapula. And slide up and under. Okay. Okay, is that okay? Now the scapula is in my hand. The point of the scapula is down here. It's kind of like the same thing. It feels sort of like the sacrum, kind of. Now what I want to see here is I want to see the shoulder drop down. And the only way that can happen is if the scapula is tractioned downward. So I'm going to traction by hooking my fingers to the top of the scapula, just for the holding place, and then I'm going to traction it like stretching my hand, like my hand is stretching to traction the scapula downward. And I'm just going to feel this stretch for a while underneath there and get that going. And then once there's the shoulder blade is now starting to lengthen very slowly, and then we want to see this come up and back. It's like an up and back, open. I'm going to open that area. And there's a lot of activity in the scapula. A lot of little movements going on between the scapula and the shoulder. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is get myself in a position to lift the scapula up. My elbow is down on the table, and I'm going to be bending my elbow and lifting up like that, and then rotating the shoulder back. And it's done, the more you get strength in your arm, the slower it can be done. And so I'm lifting the scapula and pulling it down, and then releasing the hand out. And you can see where that flattened out and it changed. Is that okay through here? Now you noticed maybe that this other shoulder went up when I did that, so we're going to go around and balance that side. So underneath to the scapula, and then, thanks. And then we're going to hold this. Now this is going to have a little activity too, because, you know, there's the connection for the balance, and this was painful, this was, you know, hurt, and this side got off, and then we corrected that side, and now this side has got a balance not only with the joints here, but also with the bigger whole thing along this clavicle. And so I'm going to do the same thing, connect onto the scapula and then traction it down, and feel this rotate, this shoulder rotate, an up and back kind of feeling. And then once it feels like the muscles are ready to go, you have to use a lot of leverage for this. I usually lean my legs into the table, both of them, and try to maintain a good straight back. It is a lot of work to do this. And so I'm just going to lift up, and then, okay, what she did was she tensed up when I did that. So
I was trying to help.
Yeah, okay, you don't want them to help. It's okay. That is part of the muscle thing. This happens all the time, so just realize, guys, that the muscles want to help. They don't really like to be dragged around. They'd rather be in control. So just learning how to relax the muscle and letting something happen is an exercise in itself. Okay, so now we're going to do this again. I'm going to lift and then pull that down, and the other shoulder stayed relatively balanced. How did that feel? Did you notice how much tension you put in there when you tried to help?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of more tension on the right here. Does that feel like a spot to you? Yeah, there's a little spot there. Now that we have the shoulders open, we can find a little bit more going on in the muscles. This happens to be the trapezius. And so I'm going to work in there to soften that. And that's just underneath, kind of pulling the fingers together, but sinking. The fingers will sink in together, and you'll feel the tissue unwinding between the hands. And this is going nice. And if you notice that Diana's in a nice relaxed position, and that's the way it works best. When people keep trying to help, or they just have tight muscles because their body is on a lot of unconscious stress patterning, it's extremely difficult, if not almost impossible, to get these kind of changes, because the body's got to cooperate and the body's got to be saying it's okay. I don't have control over what she's doing. I just have the ability to allow what the body wants from me. All ego has to be removed when you do this, because it's not you deciding what to do. It's you paying attention to what the body is telling you. And that's when we have the best results, is when the body can just do what it needs to do without interference from the brain, chattering, or allowing the body to think it has to help. So a good exercise for that is, as you're listening to this or watching this, just pay attention and see how relaxed your own body is. Do you feel like you're melting into the place you're sitting, or do you feel like you're rigid? And this is just more unwinding right here along this area that she was not happy with to begin with. And now there still is a feeling that the muscle is not perfect, but I'll tell you, it doesn't have the fluid in it. It still has an injury pattern to it, but it's much softer around it. And that means that the healing will probably move in a little bit quicker, unless she hurts it again before it's healed. And so all of this feels pretty good. And how does it feel to you? Okay, shoulders. Now let's check the shoulders here, which they are level to my touch. They're level. The vector here has been corrected. Let's see, up and down. And the alignment is good. You look for the alignment with the chin. It's a vector line. It's like stick people. After a while, you can actually see the vectors. The vectors, to me, look like little glittery stick people. And there's been a question about, when children draw stick people, maybe that's how maybe they're seeing the vectors. They don't tend to put muscles and stuff like that on them. Maybe they're just seeing the vectors. Who knows? But if you develop this up, you can see it very clearly. You can see very subtle things in people. You can tell where their energy is, and you can actually even tune in and know if they're sick, even though they may not know. You can see it a lot in the eyes, but then you can also feel it in the body. But that takes a lot of practice, so don't worry if you're just starting out to get that far. Just get it in your hands, the little stuff, and work from there, and take the time to do it right. Take the time to become an authentic, hands-on person. And this feels really good. This joint is still a little bit raised. Not as much as it was, but it's still... Now some of this too is, I'm just checking to see if it's still moving, and it is, so it suggests that over the next 12 to 48 hours, these tissues are going to continue to reorganize. They say that when you start to, when you're working on the head and you move the bones and you start to feel them move, you can actually come off the bone, because it will continue to move. But I like to follow the bone a lot further than just get it started, because I've discovered that a lot of times it has little twists and turns in the pathway that it needs to take to correct. So I like to follow the bone a little bit longer. The body can go as far as it can go, and then it'll stop and try to hold that pattern. And that's how so much of the work, when it's done very subtly, is you get, like, instead of 2 steps forward and 1 step back, you'll get like 5 steps forward and 1 step back. So the work corrects a lot quicker if it's done in a way where the brain can keep up with the changes. And this feels pretty good. There might be a little bit more work to do in this area, but overall it's very good. And now I'm going to just check the neck with some neck unwinding. And here I'm pulling a little bit of traction, not much, and then taking the head to the side. Oh, it feels like there's creaking going on. Do you feel that?
Mm-hmm.
Now that felt really interesting because it felt like the bones were separating, and it felt kind of like creaking of an old wooden ship. Not that she's an old wooden ship or anything, but... And now we have a stretching this direction. So that was good. It was actually probably a little expansion, decompression of the bone. And this feels very smooth along the bone too. And that creaking is gone. Now, had we have turned the head quickly, you wouldn't have felt that little opening that was going on in the neck. Right along where I first felt that bump spot, that wadded spot right along the neck. It's much, much, much smoother now. And that's where it felt like the creaking was. It was just stretching that area out from the impact and the compression. And of course the chiropractor's work helped on that. It aligned the bone, but the muscles were probably moved a little too quickly, which gave it that little tension. Nothing serious, nothing bad, just the way it is. That's why working different modalities together is always good, because everyone has a little bit different part of the body to offer. And so it's good to find the ones that fit you best and work the best for you, and just keep yourself in good health that way. There's still a little bit going on here. I think over the 12 to 48 hours there's going to be some more changes, and Diana knows how to stretch herself, and she knows how to move herself to pop this stuff back in. Usually taller people have a little bit more of the bone popping experience. I don't know why that seems to be so. But overall, this feels a lot different to my touch. This is all nice and evened out. And I think that we can call that good. I just like to do one other thing, is put my thumb on the third eye and the hands on the crown chakra, and then just feel the connection between these areas, these energetic areas of the body. It's kind of an energy alignment. It's very relaxing. And this just kind of finalizes balancing everything. The thing about the chakras is they have a different tone. I know many of you know that. They have different notes. And what we want to do when we raise our vibration is we want to go to the next octave. We want to raise the octave. As you saw at the end, she got very, very, very relaxed. Kind of did a little dolphin breath there, which is a deep relaxation. It was at the time when I was right over these really nice chakra areas. She did change a little bit with the posture, the way that the balance was in the shoulders. And she's got 48 hours now to reorganize all of this. So we'll just see how it goes, and I think she's going to feel better. if she doesn't do it again. And so with that, I want to say thank you again so much for watching and viewing this, and I hope it brought some ideas for you, especially if you're a therapist, or if you're just working on your friend. Just start to just be gentle, because sometimes when you just place your hands on somebody and you feel the tissue moving, you're actually doing work. The work is actually being done. So with that, I want to say thanks again. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for all that you do out there, comments and the donations. I appreciate it very much. So with that, I say thank you again and have a wonderful day. Stay healthy. Bye-bye. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. And I think there's a little bell up there that you can hit that you'll get a notification every time we post. So if you want to, you can hit that too. But thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.